I thought that day was the best day of my life. When I saw the pregnancy test in the trash, I thought my wife was about to surprise me with the happiest news of my life. I couldn't believe it. After 3 years of marriage, we were finally having a baby. But just a week later, as I held the DNA test results in my hands, I realized I had been made a fool. The baby wasn't mine. And the worst part? She knew it all along. My name is Ethan Parker, 34 years old, a financial analyst in New York. I'm not the richest man, but I have a stable life. I work hard, enough to afford a small apartment in the heart of the city, enough to take my wife on vacations a few times a year, and enough so that she never has to worry about money. I married Jessica 3 years ago. Back then, I thought I had found the perfect woman, the one I could build a life with, the one I could start a family with. Jessica works in media, a job that requires her to travel often and socialize with many people. She has a striking appearance, always knowing how to stand out in a crowd. I loved her for her confidence, her boldness, and the way she made everything feel exciting. We weren't a perfect couple, but I never imagined that my marriage would turn into a joke. My wife always told me she wasn't ready for a child. She said she wanted to focus on her career, to be more stable before thinking about having kids. I respected that, even though deep down I hoped that one day she would change her mind. So when I found the pregnancy test in the trash, I thought my wish had finally come true. But something felt off. She didn't say a word to me. I waited 1 day, 2 days. Still, she never mentioned anything about being pregnant. Why? Why was she hiding it from me? And then I noticed the first red flag. She became extremely protective of her phone. Before, she would leave it on the table or the couch without a second thought. But lately, she never let it out of her sight. One evening, I casually brought it up. I saw the pregnancy test in the trash. Why didn't you tell me? She smiled, but it was a stiff, forced smile. Oh, I wasn't sure yet, so I didn't want to say anything too soon. It sounded like a reasonable excuse, but something felt off. A growing unease settled in my chest. I knew she was hiding something. I'm not the kind of man who controls his wife. I've never thought about checking her phone or keeping tabs on her. I always believe that trust is the foundation of a marriage. But today, something was wrong. There was a voice inside me screaming that she was keeping something from me, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Ever since I mentioned the pregnancy, my wife started acting differently. She avoided eye contact. She suddenly became too busy with work. She stopped sleeping in the same bed as me at night. She took mysterious calls in the middle of the night, whispering cautiously in the bathroom. And then there was her phone. She never used to have a passcode, but now she guarded it like a treasure. And one night I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. At midnight, while she was fast asleep, I took her phone. She had changed the password. The sinking feeling in my stomach confirmed everything. But there was one thing she didn't know. I had seen her enter her passcode before, at a restaurant when we were out for dinner. I tried it and unlocked her phone on the first attempt. For a moment, I hesitated. Should I really do this? What if I was wrong? What if this was just a misunderstanding? But I had already made up my mind. I went to her messages. Most of her recent messages had been deleted, but there was something she didn't know. Deleted messages can be recovered. I went into the backup and restored everything I could. And when I did, I read a message that made my blood run cold. Are you sure it's mine? I kept scrolling. Don't tell your husband. I'll take care of it. And then, we were careful. How did this happen? A wave of nausea hit me. Sweat dripped down my back. My hands trembled as I gripped the phone. I wanted to believe I had read it wrong, but the words were too clear. My wife had a lover, and now she was pregnant with his child. But what the hell was happening? Was she planning to tell me? What was she going to do next? The answer came right after. A message from my own wife sent just days ago. Don't worry, I'll tell him it's his. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She had planned to make a fool out of me. She intentionally hid the pregnancy from me. She was going to make me raise another man's child, as if I were nothing but an idiot. I clenched my phone, grinding my teeth to keep from screaming in the middle of the night. Rage, disgust, betrayal. A storm of emotions consumed me all at once. But at that moment, I could only think of one thing. I won't let this happen. I won't be deceived so easily. She miscalculated, and she will pay for this. I knew I couldn't let my emotions take over. Not yet. She was too good at playing the victim. If I confronted her now, she would cry, make excuses, pretend I was imagining things. And if I didn't have undeniable proof, she would twist the situation and turn me into the jealous, paranoid husband. I wouldn't let that happen. I was going to expose her when she least expected it. A backstab she would never recover from. But first I needed one thing. Irrefutable evidence. I decided to pretend I knew nothing. I treated her exactly the same as before. Even better. I did everything a happy husband would do. I placed my hand on her stomach and said, "I can't wait to be a father. Thank you for bringing me this joy." She forced a smile, but I saw the unease in her eyes. She had no idea that I already knew everything. I needed to get a DNA sample. But how could I make her take a test willingly without raising suspicion? I came up with a lie. I told my parents the news. They're so excited. But my mom is a bit worried. There's a history of genetic illness in our family, and she thinks it's a good idea for you to do a full medical checkup, just to make sure everything is safe for the baby. She hesitated. I added more psychological pressure. "I know it sounds unnecessary, but for the sake of our baby, can you do it? I just want to be sure there are no risks." She was cornered. If she refused, she would look suspicious. Eventually, she nodded and agreed. I went with her to the hospital, making sure she completed all the tests. But before we left, I secretly requested the doctor to collect a DNA sample from the baby and compare it to mine. I lied and said I wanted to check for genetic compatibility to ensure no hereditary health risks. The doctor looked at me for a moment, then nodded in agreement. A week later, I received the results. I was not the father. I already knew it. But seeing it written in black and white, I still felt the world collapse around me. I had loved her for years. I had given everything to this marriage, and she had betrayed me in the most disgusting way possible. But I didn't feel pain. I felt calm, because now it was her turn to suffer. I didn't just want to leave her. I wanted to destroy everything she thought she had gotten away with. I wanted her to feel the terror of being exposed. I didn't rush. I calculated every move carefully. I started gathering more evidence. I copied every single message between her and her lover. I checked her bank transactions to see if she had sent money to an unknown account. I hired a private investigator to follow her. And the results did not disappoint. She was still meeting the man, and he had no idea that she had lied to him. Perfect. Now I would make sure that everyone knew. I decided to strike at the perfect moment. I planned a celebration dinner at our home, pretending that it was to celebrate our upcoming baby. She was thrilled. She thought she had won. I invited her entire family, her closest friends, my parents, everyone who mattered to her. That evening I dressed sharply, maintaining a calm and composed demeanor. The house was filled with laughter, joy, and celebration. She was smiling, thinking she had completely fooled me. I looked at her, at that fake smile, and felt nothing but disgust. As the night neared its end, I stood up. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I looked at her. Then slowly, I pulled an envelope from my pocket. I took out a document. It was the DNA test results. I placed it on the table, right in front of her. Silence. She started to pale. I looked her in the eyes and spoke slowly, deliberately. "This is the paternity test result, and it says, I am not the father." A dead silence filled the room. Everyone was frozen in shock. Her mother covered her mouth, eyes wide in horror. Her father clenched his jaw, fists tightening, unable to speak. Her friends exchanged confused glances, trying to process what they had just heard. She sat there trembling. I pulled out my phone, placed it on the table, and played the messages, the photos, the proof I had collected. Every disgusting text lit up the screen. There was no denying it anymore. She started sobbing, trying to say something, but no one wanted to hear it. Her parents turned away from her, their faces filled with disappointment and shame. Her closest friends avoided her gaze, refusing to defend her. I reached into my pocket one last time. I pulled out a folder and threw it on the table. It was the divorce papers. No explanation. No second chances. I had waited for this moment for a long time. I looked at her one last time, then turned my back and walked out of the house. Behind me, I could hear her wailing, the whispers of the guests, but I didn't care anymore. I had won. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't care how much she cried or how desperately she tried to twist the story. I threw the divorce papers on the table, stood up, and walked out of the house that I once called home. Behind me, she screamed, sobbing uncontrollably, but no one in that room wanted to comfort her anymore. What I did tonight wasn't just to end this marriage. It was to make her realize that some mistakes can never be undone. 1 week later, the second shock, I thought it was over. I had moved out of our shared apartment, started fresh somewhere new, but a week later I received a text from an unknown number. It was from him, her lover. The message was short. "We need to talk. Call me." I looked at it and laughed. What did he want? I ignored it. But 2 days later, he called me directly. This time I decided to pick up. His voice was tense, shaken. "We need to meet. I have something to tell you about her." I had no intention of wasting more time on him, but something about his voice piqued my curiosity. We met at a quiet coffee shop. He didn't look as cocky as I imagined. In fact, he looked nervous. And when he opened his mouth, the words that came out stunned me. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed him too. He thought he was her real man. But in reality, there was a third man. And this third man, he wasn't just another affair. He was rich. He was powerful. And most importantly, he was the real father of the baby. She had played both of us at the same time. But in truth, she had bet everything on a man far wealthier than either of us. Her lover had lost everything. But instead of feeling bad for him, I found the situation hilarious. I chuckled, stood up, and walked away. I had already won. 1 month later, her complete downfall. She had planned everything wrong from the start. The third man, the one she thought she could rely on, turned out to be a player. He had zero intention of taking responsibility. The moment he found out she was pregnant, he vanished. No contact, no messages, gone. She lost everything, exposed in front of her family, abandoned by her lover, rejected by the man she had pinned all her hopes on. Now she was completely alone. No one left to manipulate. I heard she had to move into a tiny, rundown apartment in a place where no one knew who she was. She once had everything. A husband who loved her, a stable life. But she destroyed it all with her own hands. One late night, my phone rang. It was her. I hesitated for a second, then answered. A weak, exhausted voice came through the line. "Hey!" I didn't say anything. She broke down into tears. "I'm sorry, I messed up. I have nothing left. I don't know what to do." She was desperate. She wanted me to come back. She thought I was still the man who loved her enough to forgive everything. But I felt nothing. No anger, no hatred, just emptiness. I chuckled. Good luck? I hung up, blocked her number. And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. I was finally free. Was